Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into a stack of information, sift through the details, and, well, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight.
Giving you that shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Exactly. Today, we're diving into a topic that's incredibly relevant to literally billions of people around the globe.
Yeah, this is a big one.
It really is. We're talking about the common, yet often quite frustrating challenges faced by English learners.
Things that trip almost everyone up at some point.
We're going to unpack those hurdles, the things that frequently slow people down, and more importantly, equip you with some really actionable strategies.
And these are backed by research and practical experience.
Right. Strategies to not just overcome them, but to actually thrive in your English learning journey. We've synthesized insights from quite a range of materials: linguistic research, practical guides.
All designed to give you a much clearer path forward.
Absolutely.
And it's fascinating, this landscape we're about to explore, precisely because these struggles are just so remarkably universal.
It doesn't matter if you're just starting out or...
And you've been learning for years, yeah. Chances are you've definitely bumped up against at least one of these points. So our mission in this deep dive, really, is to transform those potential frustrations into genuine aha moments.
We want you walking away feeling empowered, much clearer on your path forward.
And understanding that these aren't, insurmountable roadblocks. They're common phases, conquerable phases in your linguistic journey.
Each with its own key to mastery.
Exactly. Each one has specific keys, specific ways to tackle it. #CHAG, navigating the landscape of English learning challenges.
All right, let's kick things off with what many learners tell me is one of their biggest silent battles.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, that tendency to think in your native language first and then sort of meticulously translate every single thought into English before you can speak or even really understand sometimes.
It's like having that perpetual middleman in your brain, right?
Totally. And it slows everything down.
That's a crucial point. And, a lot of learners naturally wonder, well, why does this happen? And why is it such a significant hurdle?
Yeah, what's the mechanism there?
Well, picture it like this. Your brain is trying its best, but it's attempting to run this real-time translation service, like 247.
Exhausting.
It really is. Every English phrase that comes in gets decoded back into your native language so you can understand it.
Okay.
And then every thought you want to express, well, it first gets formed in your native language, then translated, and then finally spoken.
That sounds like a lot of steps.
It creates this huge cognitive bottleneck. It's like trying to navigate a busy city but having to take a clunky detour on every single street.
Right. Not efficient.
Not at all. This extra processing step dramatically slows down both your comprehension speed and your ability to speak naturally.
And it prevents that seamless connection you hear in fluent speakers.
Exactly, that direct connection between thought and expression. Initially, sure, it's a natural crutch. We all do it when starting something new.
Makes sense.
But it very quickly transforms into this major handbrake on spontaneity, on speed, and ultimately on achieving real fluency.
So you're always kind of playing catch up.
You're always a step behind, yeah. And that can be really exhausting and, frankly, quite discouraging for learners.
Okay, so if this internal translator is the problem, how do we, gently but effectively fire it?
Yeah, how do we give it its notice?
How do we start building those direct brain pathways so we can just jump straight to English?
Well, a really powerful starting point, and this is highlighted in our source material, is to literally start small and describe your immediate environment.
Okay, so not complex stuff.
No, not at all. This isn't about crafting like eloquent prose or grammatically perfect sentences right from day one. The core idea is much simpler.
Which is?
Begin with simple, everyday actions and just narrate them internally in English. Think, I'm making coffee or I'm walking to work.
Just talking to yourself in your head, basically.
Pretty much. The simple conscious act builds direct mental associations between what you're doing and the English words for it.
So you're linking activity and language directly?
Precisely. By narrating your actions, you're actively training your brain to link an activity or an object directly to its English phrase, bypassing that translation step entirely.
You're kind of rewiring things.
You really are. You're rewiring your brain to connect an image or a feeling or an action directly to its English counterpart.
Can you give another example?
Sure. Like, if you're washing the dishes, you could mentally narrate, I am washing the plate, now I'm washing the cup, the water feels warm, the soap is bubbly.
Very mundane, but purposeful.
Exactly. Or if you're waiting at a bus stop, describe what you see. Okay, I see a blue car driving past a tall tree. The sky looks cloudy today.
It's not for anyone else. It's just for your own brain training.
That's the key. It's about building an immediate, natural internal monologue in English. This kind of active, real-time internal narration, however simple it feels, is incredibly powerful.
Why is that?
Because it integrates English into your actual lived experience in a very tangible way. It makes English a language for doing things, for experiencing your life.
Not just for studying it in the book.
Exactly. It might feel a little weird at first, talking to yourself in your head like that,
I can imagine.
but it's a really foundational step in training your brain for that direct English thought process.
That makes a lot of sense. Building your own internal English commentary track.
You got it.
And speaking of direct pathways, the next strategy our source points to involves visual learning with flashcards.
Yeah.
But there's a twist, right? No
Yeah.
translation.
Yeah, and this is where, honestly, the magic really happens for building direct English thought. The technique is about using flashcards that pair images directly with English words.
Picture of an apple, the word apple.
Exactly. And crucially, you completely omit the native language translation.
Why is omitting it so important?
Because the brilliant part of this method is how it compels your brain to forge a new high-speed neural pathway specifically for English. Instead of seeing that picture of an apple, thinking, say, manzana in Spanish, and then translating it to apple.
You're forcing a direct link.
You got it. You're forced to create an immediate, unmediated link between the visual stimulus, the picture, and the English word.
And that strengthens the connection.
Massively. It strengthens the neural pathway for direct recognition, just like a native speaker experiences it. It's not just about recalling faster.
It's about building the infrastructure.
It's literally building a native-like mental infrastructure for English. You're bypassing that translation tax on your cognitive load.
I like that phrase, translation tax.
Think about it. Every time you use a native language translation, you're actually reinforcing the habit of using that middleman.
Right.
By cutting that out completely, you're essentially telling your brain, find the direct route or don't get there at all.
Tough love for your brain cells.
Something like that. But this approach fosters a more intuitive understanding. Recall becomes faster, more automatic.
So you could use apps or make your own cards.
Absolutely. Lots of great apps support this, or you can go old school with physical cards, draw simple pictures, whatever works.
The goal being that immediate visual to English connection.
Exactly. Making that connection primary, forcing your brain to build new cognitive maps just for English, rather than just, layering English onto your existing native language maps.
Creating a dedicated English mental library.
That's a great way to put it. Each word directly linked to its meaning or image.
Fascinating. Okay, so we're building direct visual links,
Mm-hmm.
and then to really get that direct thought-to-speech connection going, the source suggests shadowing. Sounds a bit like being a language echo.
It does sound a bit mysterious, doesn't it? But it's an incredibly effective and often really underused technique.
So how does mimicking someone almost simultaneously help you think in English, not just repeat?
Well, shadowing means listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say almost right after them, like an echo or, a shadow. But it goes way beyond just simple rote repetition. When you shadow, you're not just speaking. You're engaging your mouth muscles, your tongue.
The physical parts of speaking.
Right, your articulatory muscles and your auditory feedback loop. You're hearing yourself say it simultaneously.
Multisensory.
Exactly. This process trains your mouth, your tongue, and your brain to work totally in sync. It helps develop what linguists call proprioception for speech sounds.
Meaning your mouth sort of learns the feel of English sounds.
Precisely. Your mouth learns the physical movements required, and your ear gets finely tuned to the rhythms, the intonation patterns.
Okay, so by mimicking.
By actively mimicking, you're building that direct connection between hearing something, understanding it internally, and then physically producing the language.
And it bypasses the analytical translation part.
Almost entirely. You're internalizing the music of the language, where the stresses naturally fall, how the pitch goes up or down in questions versus statements.
So it fosters more automatic speech.
Yes, much more intuitive and automatic speech production. It makes English feel less like some foreign code you have to decipher and more like a natural physical act.
That's the goal, isn't it?
Absolutely. The real breakthrough happens when you start to actually embody the language rather than just processing it intellectually in your head.
You're kind of programming your brain by doing.
You are. You're programming your brain to think and speak directly in English by mirroring how fluent speakers do it, building that seamless bridge from internal thought to external expression.
Moving from conscious translation to unconscious production.
That's the sweet spot.
Okay, we've talked about that crucial mental game, thinking directly in English. But then, once those thoughts are ready to come out as spoken words, another common hurdle pops up.
Ah, yes. The fear of sounding wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so common to hear learners say, I understand pretty well, but I'm just too afraid to open my mouth because of my accent. How does our source help us navigate that very visible challenge of pronunciation, and maybe even more importantly, the confidence to speak despite an accent?
It's a really important question, one that so many learners grapple with. Why is pronunciation such a deep source of anxiety, even for people who understand a lot?
Yeah, what's behind that fear?
Well, it often stems from this profound fear of being misunderstood, or perhaps even more powerfully, this feeling of sounding wrong or maybe unpolished.
Feeling judged.
Exactly. Feeling judged, feeling self-conscious about their accent, sometimes even incorrectly equating a non-native accent with like a lack of intelligence or skill, which is totally untrue, of course.
Absolutely.
But zooming out, looking at the bigger picture, our source material makes this vital, really liberating distinction.
Which is?
Your accent is not a problem. Being understood is what matters most.
That's huge.
It is. It's a fundamental shift in focus, away from striving for some elusive, perfect accent, which, let's be clear, doesn't really exist anyway, given all the native accents.
All right, there's so many variations even among native speakers.
Exactly. So shifting the focus to prioritizing clear, effective communication, understanding that distinction can be incredibly freeing.
So aim for intelligibility, not erasing your background.
Precisely. Be effective in getting your message across. That's the real goal.
That's a powerful reframing. Clarity, not conformity. Okay, so how can listeners work on that clear communication without getting totally bogged down trying to sound like a specific native speaker?
Well, one remarkably accessible strategy is just to utilize the absolute wealth of apps and YouTube videos out there for active listening and repetition.
There's so much available now.
There really is. And the accessibility means you can practice anytime, anywhere. You can turn that dead time during your commute or waiting in line or doing chores
Into learning time.
into highly productive learning moments. What's really great about this approach is how consistent exposure and repetition, which these resources make easy, train both your ear and your mouth at the same time.
Building muscle memory.
Exactly. Building muscle memory for sounds and speech patterns you might not have in your native language, like maybe the sound is tricky or distinguishing V and W.
Common challenge.
Very common. These digital tools offer an infinite supply of targeted practice. You can find videos drilling specific sounds or dialogues you can repeat right after hearing them.
And that consistent practice leads to
Significant improvements in clarity over time. Your speech becomes more comprehensible, and that directly boosts your speaking confidence. It's a positive cycle.
And to really know where you stand, to get some objective feedback, the source suggests recording yourself and comparing it to native speech. Sounds powerful, maybe a little intimidating.
Haha, it can be a bit humbling at first, definitely. But this is where the real breakthrough often comes for self-correction.
How so?
Well, objectively, listening to your own speech, maybe just record yourself talking for a minute about your day or reading a short paragraph.
Okay.
It allows you to pinpoint specific areas for improvement. Maybe it's a vowel sound that's not quite hitting the mark, or a consonant that sounds a bit muddy, or a word where the stress is off.
So it makes pronunciation less abstract.
Exactly. It transforms it into concrete, identifiable targets. For instance, you record yourself saying a phrase like, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog."
The classic Bang Brum.
Right. Then listen to a native speaker say it. Then you can really zero in on the differences. Ah, okay, my R sound is softer than theirs. Or, I'm not holding that vowel sound long enough.
Or stressing the wrong syllable.
Or stressing the wrong syllable. This direct comparative feedback makes your practice so much more effective because you're targeting specific phonetic issues.
Builds self-awareness.
Crucial self-awareness. It helps fine-tune your ear not just to hear English, but to critically hear your English and how it compares. It's like being your own pronunciation coach.
Providing immediate, honest feedback.
Exactly. Leading to that powerful cycle of continuous improvement.
Now, beyond just individual sounds, our material advises focusing on stress and intonation.
Yeah.
You mentioned the music of English earlier. That seems like a bigger picture thing.
It really is. Zooming out, the broader significance here is that English isn't just about making the correct individual sounds in isolation.
It's how they connect.
It's profoundly about how those sounds are emphasized, how they're linked together, how they flow, focusing intently on stress.
Which syllables are louder or longer.
Right. And which words in a sentence carry more weight. And also focusing on intonation, the rise and fall of your voice.
Like for questions versus statements.
Exactly. Mastering those elements can dramatically improve both how natural you sound and how easy you are to understand.
Can you give an example of stress changing meaning?
Sure. The classic one is present. Stress the first syllable, present, it's a gift or right now.
Okay.
Stress the second, present, it means to give or show something. Totally different meaning just based on stress.
Wow, okay.
And intonation, too. A simple statement like, you're coming, becomes a question, you're coming, just by raising the pitch at the end.
Those nuances are key.
They're absolutely key. Mastering these prosodic features helps you sound more natural, more part of the language's rhythm. And that, in turn, significantly boosts confidence because you feel more authentic in conversations.
It's about conveying meaning through the sound itself.
Precisely. Adding layers of nuance that just literal translation can't capture. It's not just about sounding good, it's about sounding clear and natural.
Which makes conversations smoother.
And more effective, more enjoyable for everyone involved. It really is about that clarity plus practice, feeding into each other, building that positive feedback loop.
Ah, okay, now for the secret code of English, as our source calls it.
Haha, I know this one well. Phrasal verbs and idioms.
Exactly. These things are notorious for tripping up even really advanced learners. I mean, I've seen fluent friends get totally confused by things like break a leg or spill the beans.
They seem designed to confuse, don't they?
It really feels like English just created this whole extra set of rules just for fun.
You're definitely not alone in feeling that. It is one of the biggest hurdles. And it's precisely because their meaning often isn't just the sum of the individual words.
Right, look up doesn't literally mean look toward the sky usually.
Exactly. Let's dive into why they're so tricky. What really stands out about phrasal verbs is how one simple verb, like take or get or put, can completely change its meaning when you pair it with a preposition or an adverb.
Like take off.
Perfect example. As our source highlights, take off can mean removing clothes,
Okay,
or a plane leaving the ground,
right.
or even a business suddenly becoming successful. My podcast is taking off.
3 totally different meanings.
And often with no logical, literal connection between them and the words take or off.
So memorizing definitions is hard.
Incredibly difficult and inefficient. You're basically trying to learn a list of seemingly random new definitions for words you thought you already knew.
And idioms are even less literal sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Kick the bucket, bite the bullet. They're completely non-literal. And they are everywhere in natural, everyday conversation.
So you can't really avoid them if you want fluency.
You really can. Grasping them is crucial for true fluency. But their abstract nature just defies that straightforward word-for-word translation. They're deeply embedded in the culture, too.
They're not just words, they're concepts.
Well said. Exactly.
So, okay, it's clear you can't just memorize lists. How do we crack this secret code without getting totally lost?
Well, the number one strategy, the thing our source really emphasizes, is learning them in context.
Not in isolation.
Definitely not. Don't just memorize definitions off a list. We think about the bigger picture. The inadequacy of just memorizing isolated phrases becomes super clear.
Because the meaning depends so much on the situation.
Overwhelmingly. The meaning is hugely dependent on the surrounding words and the specific situation. Learning them within full sentences or dialogues or real-life scenarios like in a movie or a conversation provides those crucial clues you need to understand their nuanced meanings.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If you encounter the phrasal verb break up in a TV show about a romantic couple.
You know it means they separated.
Right. But if you hear break up in a music documentary talking about a famous band.
It means they stopped playing together, disbanded.
Exactly. The context provides the essential anchor for the meaning. And that makes it stick better in your memory, too.
Because your brain links it to a situation.
Exactly. A memorable situation, not just an abstract definition on a page. You're building this network of meaning, not just a flat list of vocabulary.
Which is why authentic content is so useful.
Profoundly useful. Watching movies, listening to podcasts, reading books, engaging with real English where these phrases pop up naturally is just invaluable.
But that makes perfect sense. See them in their natural habitat. And then, once you've seen them in context, the next step is active use.
Precisely. The next critical step is to actively practice using them in real sentences yourself.
This feels like the leap from just understanding to actually using the language.
It is. It's the crucial difference between passive recognition, understanding it when you hear or read it, and active production, where you can confidently and correctly use it yourself.
Our source gave some examples, right?
Yeah, simple ones like, I need to take off my shoes, or my podcast is taking off.
Using both meanings.
Right. This active usage is absolutely critical. When you deliberately incorporate new phrasal verbs and idioms into your own conversations or emails or even just your internal thoughts,
You solidify them.
you deeply solidify their meaning and usage in your mind. The more you integrate them into your own language, the more natural, intuitive they feel.
Breaking down that secret code.
Exactly. Turning it into just everyday English that you can use easily and confidently.
Any tips for practicing this active use?
Yeah, try to create sentences that are personally relevant to your life. That makes it stick even better. Well, if you just finished a tough project at work, you might think or say, wow, I'm glad that project is over and done with.
Okay, using an idiom there.
Or if you're excited about something coming up, you might tell a friend, I'm really looking forward to this weekend. Using a common phrasal verb.
Or needing to delay something.
Perfect. Can we put off that meeting until next week? That personal connection, that active creation, reinforces the learning way more effectively than just passive exposure.
You're not just learning about the language.
You're actively doing the language, making it your own.
All right, let's tackle a classic frustration. We've all been there. You learn a new word today, you feel like, yes, got it.
And in the tomorrow, it's just
Yeah.
gone. Poof.
Exactly. Completely forgot it when you actually try to use it. Our source confirms this is super common. Remembering vocabulary long term is a huge ongoing challenge.
It really is. It's incredibly frustrating to feel like you're constantly just relearning words you thought you already knew.
So why do we forget so easily, even after we think we've learned something?
That's a critical question, right? And what really stands out here is understanding the brain's natural and actually very efficient tendency to prune information it doesn't actively use.
It's not about being smart or not.
Not at all. It's not about lack of intelligence or effort. It's just efficient memory management.
Yeah.
Our brains are designed to prioritize and hold on to information that gets accessed frequently, stuff that seems relevant,
And ditch the rest.
and discard what appears to be unnecessary, to conserve cognitive resources. If a word isn't revisited or actively applied in some way,
It just fades.
it simply fades from accessible memory. It might move into deep long-term memory where it's hard to retrieve, or sometimes it just disappears altogether.
So understanding that use it or lose it idea is key.
Absolutely crucial for developing retention strategies that actually work with your brain's natural tendencies instead of trying to fight against them.
It's not enough just to see a word once or twice.
Definitely not. You need to interact with it repeatedly and, importantly, in different meaningful ways.
Okay, so how do we convince our brain to hold on to these words? How do we use it effectively? Our source offers some really science-backed strategies here.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful, scientifically validated tools recommended is leveraging spaced repetition system apps, SRS apps.
Like Anki or Quizlet?
Exactly like Anki or Quizlet. What's truly remarkable about these apps is how they optimize your learning based on decades of cognitive science research.
Specifically, that forgetting curve.
Precisely. They don't just show you words randomly or at fixed times. Instead, they cleverly show you words at increasing intervals based on how well you remember them.
So right before you forget it.
Exactly. They aim to show you the word just before you're about to forget it. If you get a word right, the app waits longer to show it again. If you struggle.
It shows it sooner.
Right. This systematic, evidence-based approach is incredibly efficient compared to just random review or trying to memorize lists by brute force.
It strengthens the memory trace.
Actively strengthens those memory traces at the most opportune moments. It leads to really robust, long-term retention and takes the guesswork out of reviewing.
Helping prevent that learn today, forget tomorrow cycle.
That's the goal. It maximizes your effort.
Okay, so SRS apps are one tool. What about something more creative? The source mentioned writing short daily stories using new words.
Yes. And this is a fantastic way to make vocabulary learning more engaging and less like a dry task.
How does it help retention?
Well, this strategy goes way beyond simple recall. It forces you to actively use the word in a meaningful, self-created context.
You have to make it fit.
Exactly. By crafting a narrative, even a super simple one, maybe just 3 or 4 sentences, you engage multiple parts of your brain at the same time.
Right.
Your memory to recall the word, your creativity to weave it into a story, and your language skills to make sure it fits grammatically and makes sense.
That multimodal engagement again.
Right. It makes the word stick much more firmly because it's no longer just an isolated piece of data. It has context, it has connections.
Turns passive vocabulary into active vocabulary.
That's the key difference. Words you might recognize but struggle to actually use become words you can pull out and apply yourself.
So if I learn the word ubiquitous,
You could write a little story about how smartphones feel ubiquitous these days, or how coffee shops seem ubiquitous in your city, or even a funny story about an ubiquitous squirrel you see everywhere.
giving it a personal connection.
That personal connection and narrative home dramatically increase its chances of being remembered and becoming part of your active vocabulary.
And finally, a very direct, maybe overlooked method. Just speak those new words out loud. Seems almost too simple.
It does seem simple, but it has a profound effect. Zooming out, speaking words aloud engages your auditory memory. You hear yourself say it, and your motor memory, you feel your mouth making the sounds.
Making it multisensory learning again.
Exactly. When you physically articulate a word, you hear it, you feel your mouth and tongue forming the sounds, and you connect that physical act directly to the word's meaning.
Our source emphasized.
Yeah, it emphasizes. The more your brain uses a word, the less likely it forgets it.
So move it from abstract concept to tangible sound.
Precisely. Move new vocabulary from just being ideas on a page or screen to being actual sounds and expressions that become part of your everyday English.
It creates a stronger memory trace.
Much stronger, more robust, because you're literally putting the word into practice, transforming it from something you just know to something you actually do.
So maybe talk to yourself more.
Absolutely. Try making a daily habit of speaking new words in sentences, even if you're alone. Describe things around you, summarize something you read, narrate your thoughts for a few minutes.
That active physical engagement makes them less likely to be forgotten.
Far less prone to being forgotten. It ensures they become an integral part of your active, ready-to-use vocabulary.
Okay, learning English, or really any big skill, it's definitely a marathon, right? Not a sprint.
Oh, absolutely. It takes time and consistent effort.
And our source points out something we all experience. Motivation can fluctuate like crazy. You might feel super energized on Monday, ready to learn for hours.
And then by Thursday, you're just completely drained, totally unmotivated.
Exactly. So the huge question for learners is, how do you stay on track? How do you keep moving forward when that initial burst of enthusiasm inevitably starts to fade?
That's such a crucial point. And many learners wonder, why is motivation so fickle? Why does it come and go like that? And how can we possibly counter it?
Yeah, what's the psychology there?
Well, what really stands out is the psychological reality of any long-term goal. That initial enthusiasm, often fueled by excitement or seeing quick early results, is powerful, no doubt.
But it doesn't last.
Rarely, if ever, is it enough on its own to sustain consistent effort over the months or even years that real language mastery takes.
Life gets in the way.
Exactly. Our energy levels change. Stuff happens in our lives. Even our daily mood can massively impact how motivated we feel.
So if we can't rely on motivation,
Well, if we look at the bigger picture, the source's core message here is incredibly profound, maybe even transformative.
which is,
Motivation will come and go, but habit stays.
okay, focus on habit, not motivation.
It's a fundamental shift in perspective. It moves us away from relying on those fleeting feelings of inspiration,
Which are unreliable.
totally unreliable, and moves us towards building ingrained, automatic routines that require minimal willpower.
Things you do almost without thinking.
Exactly. Making learning so integrated and automatic that you just do it whether you feel motivated that day or not.
Okay, so it's about building those resilient, consistent habits. That makes sense. How do we start building those habits that will carry us through the motivational lows?
Well, one incredibly effective strategy, proven time and again in behavioral science, is to set small daily goals.
Really small.
Yes, tiny. The core idea is to break down your learning into manageable, easily achievable tasks, like commit to just 10 minutes of listening, or review 5 new flashcards, or write 3 English sentences today.
So it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Exactly. This strategy directly combats overwhelm. Instead of facing that huge, daunting goal of learn English, which feels
Where
massive,
you get small wins every day.
you get small, concrete wins. And these small successes pile up. They build momentum. They give you a sense of accomplishment, and that actually fuels further effort.
Making the marathon feel less intimidating.
Significantly less intimidating.
Yeah.
You're just focusing on one achievable step at a time. Maybe it's just listening to one English song on your commute.
Or reading one news headline in English.
Perfect. The immediate goal isn't fluency that day. It's just showing up and completing that tiny, non-threatening task.
Consistency over intensity.
Consistency, even in small doses, always beats sporadic, intense bursts that you can't sustain. Think about building a streak. Each day you complete your small task reinforces the habit.
And to make those small wins feel more real, the source suggests tracking your progress. That seems logical.
Absolutely. Our source wisely says it feels good to see how far you've come. And what's truly remarkable here is the psychological power of seeing that progress visually.
Especially when you feel stuck.
Exactly. In the early stages, or maybe during a learning plateau, progress can feel incredibly slow, maybe even invisible. That can be really discouraging.
Right.
But seeing tangibly how many words you've learned, or lessons you've finished, or minutes you've practiced, that provides undeniable evidence of your effort and growth.
It's positive reinforcement.
Powerful intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
especially on those low motivation days when you feel like you're going nowhere.
So how do you track? A notebook? An app?
Anything works. A simple notebook, putting ticks on a calendar, using a habit tracking app, even a spreadsheet. Just seeing that chain of completed days or a growing list.
It's inspiring.
Incredibly inspiring. It confirms your efforts are paying off, even if you don't feel it directly right then. It creates this visual story of their dedication.
Okay, small goals, track progress.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, to really make that habit stick, the source says, make it fun.
Yes. This is maybe my favorite one.
Integrate learning with stuff you already enjoy, watching shows, listening to music, following creators on social media.
It sounds like the opposite of a chore, doesn't it?
It really does.
And it's a total game changer. Zooming out, making learning inherently enjoyable, drastically lowers the barrier to consistency.
Because you want to do it.
Exactly. When practice feels like leisure, like something you actually look forward to, you're exponentially more likely to do it regularly. You don't need that elusive motivation or a feeling of obligation.
So if you love cooking,
Watch English cooking shows. If you're into gaming, join an English-speaking online community. If fashion's your thing, follow English-speaking influencers on TikTok or YouTube.
and you're learning without feeling like you're studying,
Right. This authentic exposure provides natural context for language acquisition. You're reinforcing vocabulary and grammar organically, almost by accident, without it feeling like a tedious chore.
you're just engaging with your interests.
Tapping into your existing passions makes English a seamless part of your life, not just some separate subject you have to study.
That transforms it from an obligation to a pastime.
And that fosters a much more sustainable, joyful, and ultimately a much more successful learning journey.
Okay, our final challenge. And this is one that, honestly, even native speakers can struggle with sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Which one's this?
Understanding all the different English accents out there.
Mm.
From American to British, Australian, Irish, Indian, South African. The variations can be huge.
Mm-hmm. It's a vast landscape.
Sometimes I find myself rewinding a podcast or asking someone to repeat themselves just to catch what they said, even as a native speaker.
That's a very practical issue for learners. So the question becomes, why are accents so challenging sometimes? And what's a realistic goal for developing this kind of global ear?
Yeah, what should learners aim for?
Well, what really stands out here is just acknowledging that English is a truly global language spoken by billions, and its incredible diversity of accents simply reflects that reality.
It's not monolithic.
Not at all. You have countless regional accents just within the UK or the US, let alone the distinct ways English sounds in Canada, Australia, India, Nigeria, the Philippines, and so many other places.
And the source points out.
Yeah, it correctly points out that sometimes even native speakers don't understand each other perfectly, especially across big geographical divides or with very strong regional dialects.
Okay, that's actually reassuring.
It is. So if we look at the bigger picture, the goal probably isn't to understand every single accent perfectly from day one. That's likely an unrealistic, maybe even impossible target.
So what's the goal then?
The aim is to build a robust, flexible listening comprehension. skills that can adapt and extract meaning from a wide range of different pronunciations.
Building versatility and resilience in listening.
That's it, exactly.
So if the goal is adaptability, not perfection across the board, how do we actively build that flexible global ear? Where should people start?
Well, the first and maybe most direct strategy is just to deliberately expose yourself to diverse accents.
Don't just stick to one type.
Right. Don't only watch American TV shows or only listen to British news. Actively seek out movies, interviews, podcasts, news broadcasts, YouTube channels from various English-speaking countries.
Explore the variety.
Exactly. Check out British dramas, Australian news reports, Canadian documentaries. Listen to interviews with people from India or Ireland or South Africa speaking English.
And this trains your ear.
This proactive, intentional immersion trains your ear to recognize different phonetic patterns, different intonations, different speeds of speech, the more varied your input.
The more adaptable your listening becomes.
Precisely. You're building a wider acoustic vocabulary for English, expanding your recognition beyond just one regional sound.
Like learning to recognize different musical instruments.
That's a great analogy. Each plays the same notes maybe, but the sound, the timbre, is unique. The more you hear, the better you get at distinguishing and understanding. It builds resilience.
Any practical tips for finding diverse content?
Oh, yeah. Free apps like TuneIn Radio are fantastic. You can access radio stations from all over the English-speaking world instantly. YouTube is obviously a goldmine, too.
Okay, makes sense. Expose yourself widely.
Fine.
But even then, you probably won't catch every single word right.
Almost certainly not, especially at first.
So the source advises, don't panic if you don't understand everything. Focus on key words and context instead.
Yes, and this strategy is absolutely crucial for reducing anxiety and just maintaining flow when you're trying to understand in real time.
Instead of getting stuck on one missed word.
Exactly. Instead of getting mentally paralyzed by individual words you might miss, train yourself to actively listen for the most important words, usually the nouns, verbs, key adjectives.
The main message carriers.
Right. And use the surrounding context, what was said before, the overall topic, visual cues if you're watching something, like body language.
To ensure the meaning.
To infer the meaning, yeah. What's really interesting here is that native speakers do this constantly.
We do.
All the time. In noisy places, during fast conversations, or when someone has an accent we're not used to, we rely heavily on context to fill in the blanks and get the gist.
So it's a normal communication strategy.
Totally normal. This approach helps you maintain flow and confidence in conversations, letting you participate and grasp the main message, even if you miss a few syllables here and there.
The goal is the main idea, not perfect transcription.
Exactly. Grasp the gist and move forward.
And finally, a really reassuring thought for anyone worried about their own accent when speaking to native speakers, something that often holds learners back.
Ah, yes. The flip side of the coin.
Remember, native speakers are used to hearing many accents. The goal is clear communication.
This ties back so powerfully to our earlier points about confidence and that crucial distinction between a perfect accent and simply being clear.
The source reminds us.
It reminds us you don't have to sound like them, just aim to communicate clearly.
That feels empowering.
It really should. It empowers you to speak without that debilitating fear of having a non-native accent. In our globalized world, native English speakers interact constantly with people from incredibly diverse language backgrounds.
Colleagues, clients, friends.
All sorts. As a result, they are generally remarkably adept at understanding a wide range of pronunciations, as long as the speech is reasonably clear, articulated, and follows basic rhythm patterns.
They're focused on the message, not the accent.
Mostly, yes. They're used to variety. Your unique accent is part of who you are, part of your linguistic journey. As long as you focus on being intelligible, on delivering your message effectively,
It's usually not an issue.
it's generally a non-issue for effective communication. Your goal is simply to be understood, and with these strategies we've talked about, you're well on your way to achieving that. Hashtag, outro.
So we've taken a pretty deep dive there into 6 of the most common yet often deeply felt challenges that almost every English learner encounters.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We journeyed from that internal battle, thinking directly in English, through the nuances of pronunciation and building confidence.
Tackled that secret code of phrasal verbs and idioms.
Looked at the memory game of vocabulary retention, the psychological marathon of staying motivated.
And finally, navigating that wonderfully diverse world of English accents.
And I think we've seen how these aren't really insurmountable obstacles, are they? They're more like common, predictable phases in the learning journey.
Exactly. And each one has clear, actionable strategies you can use to master it.
Yeah.
And what's truly illuminating, I think, is how interconnected all these challenges are. Addressing one can have this powerful ripple effect, positively impacting others.
Like how working on shadowing helps pronunciation and confidence.
Precisely. Or how learning vocabulary and context, maybe through writing stories, naturally helps you integrate those tricky phrasal verbs and idioms.
It all links together.
It really does. By understanding the why behind these hurdles, the cognitive stuff, the psychological principles at play, and then diligently applying these practical solutions,
You're not just learning English.
you're becoming a more strategic, more resilient, more self-aware learner. You're equipping yourself with tools that honestly can apply to learning any new skill or tackling any challenge.
That's a great point. These insights are universal tools for empowerment.
They really are applicable well beyond just learning English.
Okay, so that brings us to our final provocative thought for you, our dedicated listener, to mull over.
Your turn to reflect.
Thinking about your own personal journey with English, which of these 6 challenges we discussed today resonates most powerfully with you right now?
Is it that persistent translation trap? That familiar fear of speaking out loud?
Maybe the baffling mystery of idioms, the struggle to make new words stick.
Or perhaps that frustrating motivation roller coaster? Or maybe it's navigating all those different accents?
Pinpoint the one that feels most relevant to you at this moment.
And then, maybe more importantly, what's one single, small, truly actionable step you could realistically take this week, something inspired directly by today's deep dive, to start tackling that specific hurdle?
Just one small step.
Remember, every single fluent speaker you admire was once a beginner, facing these same challenges. You are absolutely doing better than you probably think you are.
Keep practicing, keep speaking, keep exploring.
The path to fluency isn't really about reaching some mythical state of perfection. It's about consistent, intentional progress, one confident step at a time. Keep going.